In politics, I think it's assumed that disunity is death. And Reform UK, the enfant terrible of British politics, has spent months galloping ahead of the political rivals, noting their disunity, not by virtue of vision, but by vacuum. A vacuum left by the Conservatives' implosion and infighting, and by Labour's cautious managerialism. And the polling by the I paper and by the BMG reveals that Farage's insurgent populism is not immune to the political laws of gravity, or indeed to hubris. Because now the numbers, a 4-point drop in Reform UK's support over the last month. That is significant, falling from first to third in the polls, and this coincides precisely with the bitter internal strife between Farage and his own MP, his own former MP, Rob Arthur Low-Key, the man once better known for chairing Southampton Football Club than for his grasp on democratic decorum. Mr. Lowe publicly accused Farage of having messianic tendencies, an evocative phrase conjuring images of Farage wandering through Clacton in sandals, walking on the sea front, preaching border control and binning net zero. Yet the more fatal claim was that Reform had hit its ceiling, a brutal diagnosis, particularly because it might well be true. And Farage responded in typical style with righteous fury and ducking the media, keeping a low key. And Lowe was suspended amid allegations surfacing of workplace harassment and threats towards Reform's chair, Zia Youssef, allegations now with the police. But however justified the suspension may be procedurally, the political damage was already done. You see, voters don't parse the HR manual. They don't care about the HR manual. They smell dysfunction and they walk. So this isn't just about Lowe. It's about the illusion of discipline. For months, Farage projected Reform as a lean, mean, anti-elite machine, and now the veil is dropped. And it resembles every other party, fallible, factional, and feuding, but it has ever thus been so in a machine run by Farage. UKIP, Brexit, Reform, it's all the same. He has his thugs running around the place enforcing one standard of one opinion. This isn't a broad church party. This is a one-way diktat, and the consequences have been swift and visible. Farage's personal approval rating, once improbably positive, has now slumped into negative territory, hitting -7. And though still rosier than Keir Starmer's dire -30, this shift among Reform's 2024 voters is significant. The red meat no longer satisfies. Some have begun glancing back towards the Tories, their former home, nostalgic perhaps for familiar dysfunction over the theatrics of insurgent stupidity. And then the optics. This week's rally, the key Reform target, was described by onlookers as half empty. No doubt Farage will claim it was a theatrical illusion, a venue too large for its own good, but when the optics fail, so does the narrative of an unstoppable ascent. Farage himself has brushed off the low-key debacle at a press gallery launch, insisting the internal spat is irrelevant on the ground. He said, in Doncaster, they've never bloody heard of him. That may well be so, but they have heard of chaos. And they're not deaf to the sounds of a party unravelling, however distant the thread. Meanwhile, Starmer, despite his own charisma vacuum, has edged into diplomatic territory, hosting European leaders, offering steady if uninspiring progress on Ukraine. Leadership, demonstrable leadership, as opposed to this noise from Farage. This flatulence is not even noise from the right end. BMG notes that Labour is making gains in public confidence on foreign policy, though crucially not in Starmer's personal ratings. It's a shift from hopeless to grudgingly competent, but it is a shift in the right direction. In this electoral cycle, that may suffice. It may be enough to ensure that Labour isn't completely routed in the May elections. The real story, however, is the collapse of Reform's exceptionalism. They are now ordinary. They're like everybody else, vulnerable to headlines, vulnerable to polls, vulnerable to internal implosion. For a party built on anger, it turns out that rage is now pointed inwards. And so what looked like a populist insurgency on the brink of real power begins to resemble a protest movement again, cannibalizing itself, just as the taste of victory was in sight for a party built on anger, to turn that anger inwards. There we are. That's about despair, isn't it? Whether Reform can stabilise and convert its disaffected base into local electoral wins remains to be seen, but time is now running out, and the days of unchallenged rise appear to be over. And in the end, perhaps Rupert Robb, Arthur Lowe, had a point when the Messiah complex really meets reality, and Farage is set to scale the tides and see if he can actually be supported on the water, on the waves, and he starts to fall under. Well, doesn't look so messianic now, does it? It doesn't look as if it's going to be that successful, does it? He doesn't look as if the keys to number 10 are balanced in his prophet hand anymore. Ha ha ha.